Let's get it. We back with another one. It's like, nah, let me stop gassing. Y'all know the vibes, though. Welcome back to another Purpose Served podcast. I'm your legendary host, Daryl Wingfield. Let me get myself situated real quick. Hold on one now. My bad. But yeah, how y'all been? Thank y'all for tuning in. And brief introduction for those of y'all that's new to this podcast. This is the Purpose Served podcast, and the goal is very, very, very simple here. I make this very clear every single podcast episode, and this podcast is to simply, I try to do the best to inspire you guys to be the best version of yourselves that you could possibly be. Now, I can't do that for you. You ultimately have to get that done yourself. But in the world that we living in now, and real life interactions, you don't really get that motivation. You don't necessarily get that inspiration to actually push. And what I've been personally recognizing within my life and around my circle, around my job, and around the nature of what I'm doing is simply the fact that people are legit going through an identity crisis, seriously. And I'm seeing where the root of that is coming from. And the root of that is coming from people neglecting their own well-being. People neglecting their own maintenance, in a sense. We got a physical body. This is about to get real, real deep. And for those that's been tuning in, you already know the vibes. Thank y'all. But we got a body, you know. But the one thing I've been looking through these last couple of months, we're putting together this World of Purpose project, is that if you cut open a human body, does that necessarily tell you what a human body is? When you take out a person's heart, if you lay them out on a table and doing an autopsy on a dead body, you take out the heart, you take out the liver, you take out all of that, it is going to show you, probably somebody's behavior and their history on what they lived. But the one thing that it doesn't show you is this person's soul and this person's spirit. How can you measure that? How can you measure that? Right? And what I've been recognizing is that question that I did ask is the most important thing. That the spirit and soul that we all have and that we all share, it really is our identity and it really is our stamp. But with the direction of our society and the direction of our culture, we getting conditioned to look at everything in a mechanical way. Example of that, like I said, laying down on a surgeon's table, and somebody can measure how many times your heart beat. Somebody could measure your pulse, how many times you're breathing a day. But like I said, does that tell you what that person is, who that person is? And with life, the consequence to that order is that ultimately you're going to live out your soul and spirit, and it's going to crystallize and take shape in this form of existence that we live in that's always in a state of decay. It is always in a state of decay. In fact, what is the word for that? If I'm not mistaken, is it entropy? I don't know. Let's find out. The definition of entropy: lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. And in the realm of physics, a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as a degree of disorder or randomness in a system. So, I don't know. I'm no expert in physics, but that almost seems like, for example, if thermal energy can't really convert, for example, like the sun seems like the perfect example of that. And it starts to be unpredictable. Life wouldn't exist. It would cease to exist. So no more trees, no more water, no more clouds, no more beautiful flowers, no more grass, no more your lovely dog, no more your beautiful parents, no more your lovely girlfriend, no more your friends, none of that. It's all gone if it decides to do what it wants. So that's interesting in a sense to really think about it. That tells us a lot. That tells us that this whole universe is of a grand design. This also shows us that if all of these things predate itself, ideas had to come first. And this is something that I talk about in the ideas to results program with the stages of attention, that things in the creation stage start off simply in the mind's eye. It starts off as an idea before it manifests itself in behavior. And we are given constant proof of that any and everywhere. So every single device that you're using, the car that you drive, everything. And I talk about this countless amount of times, but it started as an idea that somebody had. And then they had to develop a plan to bring it to fruition. And not only that, they had to act on that plan and bring it in the right place, in the right environment, in the right timing, in order for that to come about. And what constantly brings me to this is simple observation of nature. For those of y'all that's really want to tap in with yourselves, just deeply look at the things that God created, and that's going to tell you a whole lot about yourself. It's going to take you quiet in your mind and simply dissolving into whatever it is that you're focused on. Because I tell you what, before I continue on, what you primarily focused on is partly the issue why, you most likely have issues in regards to living out your purpose or finding your purpose or finding peace. Ultimately, that's what we all looking for in the midst of, a universe that's constantly decaying. Majority of things don't exist anymore, and this planet speaks to that. All of the ancestors from way back when, before even Homo sapiens, they don't exist no more. We're like the remnants of everything that came before us in like 13 point whatever billion years. That's a really, really long time to make a perfect world for us. And at the rate that we're destroying it at, compared to that 13.4 or whatever, I don't even know the actual number, that's alarming. And that should be extremely alarming for anybody. But what's even more alarming than that is that this is not really talked about. is not really looked at. It's more so keeping the circus going. And that's always of, I guess, all cultures, throughout all times, We got sports now, and in Rome they had the Colosseum. And I don't know what the dude name is. I think his name is Dan Carlin. He does the podcast Hardcore History. And one of the things when I was listening to his podcast he did a whole podcast that was like 3+ hours on public executions. OD intense. But he brought out the question, something to think about. What's worse? Actually seeing people get ripped to shreds in a Coliseum, like gladiators versus like lions, or going to the movies and watching a horror film, watching something real grotesque because you seriously want to see it. What's worse? It actually happening, or you actually want to see that, but it's just simply in your imagination. Isn't that crazy? That's very, very thought-provoking. And I spoke about this previously, I think, on the last podcast. It's just that the tension that's going on now in the air. And that simply tells you the direction that we are headed in. And it's hostile. And it's something. I got something to read, actually. And this comes from before I get back to the point of going on a little tangent right now. But Jesus Christ had a conversation with a Pharisee, a lawyer, at that, right? And this lawyer pretty much, of course, trying to belittle him, trying to mock him, trying to make him look stupid, asked him a question about the law. And by the law, I'm referring to the word Torah, Tanakh, the Bible, whatever you want to call it. But in it, and it's Matthew 22, chapter 22, verse 35, it says that one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. That's the first one, and the great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Right? That's fairly simple. That's common sense. That's the golden rule. Do unto others as you have done to yourself. And like I said, what I'm recognized around me and the energy that's around me, that ain't the case. People necessarily could care less about somebody's outcome and somebody's destination. But we got to this point for a reason. And to understand the generations that came before us is going to show us literally the direction that we're going in. And fortunately for myself, I've been paying like really, really close attention to that. And the city that I come from, which I talk about all the time, it's a loss of that. And it was happening before I was even born. And it was happening before my mother was even born. And it was happening before my grandmother was even born. And I'm the third generation of the city. And the path of my mom was an anomaly. And shout out and congratulations to her. She just retired from the New Jersey State Police 20 years in. Now she's moving on to be the chief of police in Massachusetts at UMass. So congratulations to her, boy. What a journey through and through. And the 10 people that I even spoke on in regards to the World of Purpose last podcast episode, and just to, tell a couple of people that's not familiar with anything that I'm even talking about. Some of the people are Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, Moses, Abraham, Malcolm X, Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung. And Carl Jung is going to be somebody I'm going to be bringing up a little bit later on in this podcast. I can mention them quite frequently on this podcast. But these individuals had some challenging lives and challenging journeys. But also, they lived out their imaginations. And every last one of them, that came with a consequence to what they manifested in the world through their spirit and through their soul. And it left an impact. And we all do that no matter what. It's a byproduct of living. But what we are forgetting to do is live. We forgetting to live life. And we are also being conditioned to live other people's lives. And right now, due to the fact that we have endless amount of access to information, as time go on, you're only going to be shown what's in your realm of perspective. So you guys better be mindful of what you guys are thinking about and how you guys are feeling. With the development of technology, we still don't know the consequences and the results of what we're doing in real time. We don't know. And this is, as a byproduct, is going to affect the next generation. And that's why we got to protect them. Right? We got to protect their spirit, and we got to protect their soul first. And that's going to really allow us to protect their body. That's another thing that's going crazy right now, is child abuse and trafficking kids. That's a lot of that stuff is coming to light. Heavy stuff. Heavy stuff. I ain't going to get into all of that, though. That's for y'all to dig into on y'all own time. But there's a lot of real things going on in the world, and not only that, in real time and real speed, there's a lot of real things being revealed as well. And a gentleman by the name of, I gotta find this guy. Tom, is his name Tom Ross? Forgive me, people. Hugh Ross, Dr. Hugh Ross, has been very, very insightful for me understanding how precious life actually is. And also helping me with my insight with the project World, the purpose of connecting science and religion. And showing that it covers each other's blind spots with the study of spirit and the study of nature, natural science. But one thing that he pointed out, which is very, very interesting to me, is just the part of the universe that we live in is very, very safe, and at the same time, very, very dark. And we're constantly in a state of motion. We're always moving. So that means that we're eventually going to be heading towards, dangerous territory, towards the unknown. So that I preach all the time. It's ingrained in the fabric of the universe. And like I said, we tell these stories through the herald archetype. Right? Going towards growth, going towards things that scare you, and it's going to require courage for you to go into the pit and face the dragon. We are forced through these points of life as we grow up, but isn't it odd and unique that we was programmed before we even broke through the birth canal to respond in a certain way, to react in a certain way, to think in a certain way, to feel in a certain way, to experience the world, and which can never ever be duplicated. That's you. That is you. They don't teach you that. Where do you go to learn that? Unfortunately and fortunately, I'll tell you where. The School of Life experience. And it's something in the OG podcast, I talked about balancing out knowledge and action. And when you do too much on the action side, you become real reckless. And I told you guys, even in regards to me and some people that's new to me, I was on that side of being real action oriented, but also made me real reckless, making real bad decisions. real. It's like, nah. And on the opposite end, gaining knowledge, it slows you down. It leads to procrastination. You contemplate. It causes indecision. You're very skeptical about your next move. And it takes extremely a long time to act. So with that being said, there's a problem with constantly making mistakes, but there's also a problem with not making mistakes at all. You want to mix it up right in the middle. That's always the best spot to be in. And our spirit and soul carry significant information about time's beginning. And why not build a very good relationship with the Creator that created all things to really get aligned with the light that's built into you and cast it in darkness? Because it seemed like this is a very selfless intent, the act of creation, and in the same breath it also seems very personal, which in the direction that I keep mentioning with the culture and society that we're living in, we get removed from things being very personal. And it's showing in our interrelations. And when I was at Barnes & Noble last week, another side note, I was in the science section looking for a book. And there was one book that stood completely out in my face. And I listened to this audiobook on YouTube. Those of you that's not going to come across the book or don't like reading, but instead like to listen, well, here you go. Free knowledge. But Man in the Symbols by Carl G. Jung. I said I was going to be bringing them up. Here we go. And this book is Carl Jung's last book. And this book was finished 10 days before he died. And I believe that he put together this book with a team of people within a year. This book at first was something that Carl Jung didn't want to commit himself to. As with all great minds, they struggle with putting their ideas into the general public because they fear ridicule, persecution, criticism. Who wants to really deal with that? But he got pretty good reviews on him doing a public interview, I believe in I think at his home in Zurich. that made people very, very curious about this dude and his mind. And, what is an introvert and extrovert? What is the shadow? What is the process of individuation? What are these things? The persona. And that's what this book pretty much is. And it's a deep, deep look into the relationship of our conscious and unconscious mind and dreams, and how significant dreams play in our lives. And at the time, he was a pioneer for psychology. It was a new field of study around that time. And him and Sigmund Freud pretty much became the godheads of psychology, even though there were countless some other people that were involved and contributed, I'm pretty sure, just as much to the field as them two. But as with anything, they became the the lamb, in a sense. But it's something that I want to read you guys in this book that's fairly in the beginning. So it says, whoever denies the existence of the unconscious is in fact assuming that our present knowledge of the psyche is total. And this belief is clearly just as false as the assumption that we know all there is to be known about the natural universe. Continuing on reading, our psyche is part of nature, and its enigma is as limitless. Thus, we cannot define either the psyche or nature. We can merely state what we believe them to be and describe as best we can how they function. Quite apart, therefore, from the evidence that medical research has accumulated, there are strong grounds of logic for rejecting statements like, there is no unconscious. Those who say such things merely express an old age Mycenism, if I said that right, which is a fear of the new and the unknown. There are historical reasons for this resistance to the idea of the unknown part of the human psyche. Consciousness is a very recent acquisition of nature, and it is still in an experimental state. It is frail, menaced by specific dangers, and easily injured. As anthropologists have noted, one of the most common mental derangements that occur among primitive people is what they call the loss of soul, which means, as the name indicates, a noticeable disruption, parentheses, or more technical, a disassociation, in the parentheses, of consciousness. And ultimately, this shows us that we weren't even built to know all there is to know, or do all that there is to do. We were built to do our part, as with literally every single thing in the universe. It was built to do its part. E equals MC squared, right? Going to Albert Einstein, which is going to be the first person of this project, which is the first person in this project, but he tells us that energy and mass is two different manifestations of the same thing. So how much, like, if something has a lot of energy, that determines how small the mass is, and vice versa. That's insane. So, for example, some of the most smallest and densest things in our whole entire universe is a black hole. And the bottom of that is called the singularity. And it works similar to our eyeball, ironically enough, where no light can escape. And that's what's at the center of our galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy, a black hole that we're heading towards. And the guy, Hugh Ross, within the arms of the spiral clouds, when you look up the Milky Way, we in a safe region for travel through that in our Milky Way. And I believe that them clouds that's being formed are like pretty much new stars. Insane. But everything is intentional and purposeful. Is it important to know the meaning. Why? Somewhat, to a certain extent. It's not everything. What is everything being what it was meant to be in existence, in reality. And we're missing that. And it shows. It's quite obvious. And another part in his book reads that many people mistakenly overestimate the role of willpower and think that nothing can happen to their minds that they do not decide and intend. But one must learn to discriminate carefully between intentional and unintentional contents of the mind. The former are derived from the ego personality. The latter, however, arise from a source that is not identical with the ego, but is its other side. It is this other side that would have made the secretary forget the invitations. So in that part of the book, Carl Jung was talking about forgetfulness and how our thoughts is as fleeting as clouds and as mist. And what you guys want to do to maximize your potential here on earth right now is to harden your ideas and harden your visions within your behavior. This is why I preach these things so much, because there is a formula to it. Rather than just shooting for the stars and just hoping that luck lands on your side, you could be a little bit more on point than that. You know? And not only that, you can fix the ongoing problems that's happening in the world instead of taking a step back and letting the world just die out in flames. Go to straight ashes. There's a consequence to pay for that. Not only for you, but your kids and your kids' kids. And your parents and your grandparents. What was it all for, right? And it's very, very simple to build that relationship with yourself. And it's to understand that there's a higher power that created this, that's responsible for you as well. Believe it or not. And if you deeply cared about your creator, you will recognize that your creator is also responsible for the creator that created all things, even beyond humans. That's why I also talk about nature a lot, because it also reflects God's creation and also shows us a glimpse of the past, which is insane. That, I find it very, very fascinating that with the observable universe, the original light that we see that made us journey, from object to object, all the way from the very, very beginning, that we can see that. When you look out in the stars, that's what you're looking at. And we're on a spaceship. Everything is expanding away from each other, from that singularity point from which it all started. And then something had to be behind that, because this is not random. In fact, it's made with the utmost precision, and the grand creator obviously had a grand design for this. And like I said, you just can't cut open, a human, and that tells you what a human is. There's spiritual things at work, and we all have souls, whether people like to recognize it or not. And that's part of the problem. People don't recognize that there's an invisible force that's guiding all things. Dark matter and dark energy. Look into it, people. They say, 97, probably more than that percent of our universe is filled with dark energy and dark matter. But is that a void? Is that really nothing? What are we really moving through? And prima materia. You guys can look at that in your free time as well. Just dropping free gems for you guys. But by looking at water, and I'm pretty sure I probably already talked about this on this podcast, it just seemed like it has the same qualities of what that void and outer space, that dark matter and that dark energy, what that actually is. it seemed like it was extremely similar. And how fish move through water, it seemed like that's how planets, in a more synchronized way, move through the vacuum of space. And light taking form into mass. You fill with endless amount of potential. Harden it. Leave something solid that's going to contribute to life as a whole. And I'll tell y'all what, you ain't going to do that in like 12 hours. If you did, that ain't it. You ain't going to do that in like 5 years. If you did, that ain't it. You ain't going to do that in like 10 years. If you did, that ain't it. It's a lifelong commitment. It's a lifelong journey. So always deepen that relationship with yourself. And if you think you really know yourself, try again. Wait for those things in the unconscious to pop up. And hint, hint, shout out to Carl Jung. They typically pop up in your dreams when your conscious mind take a back seat and your unconscious mind step up to the front and put in that real work to heal your body, heal your mind, and give you every single sign to let you know how to get you right back on equilibrium, because that's what it's doing. But it itself ain't really conscious, and neither do it want to be. But sometimes it can't help but to creep up. And it oftentimes creep up when we're in the conscious waking state, and certain things make us lash out, certain smells make us recall certain memories of the past. Just because you think you forgot something, that don't mean that it completely went away. It probably just went into the dark recesses of your mind. Activate your whole mind, activate your whole soul, and act it out in your body. And as you live that out, it's going to be shown through the world the impact that you left. And that's going to say who you really are when it's said and done. Unbiasedly. For you personally. But thank you guys for tuning in to another Purpose Served podcast episode. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And tune into The World of Purpose. Which is the project highlighting individuals that left a significant impact on the world through their mind's eye. Until next time, folks. Deuces.